Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this Strategic Planning Committee today. We'll start straight away with the agenda. So going to membership of the committee, we've had apologies from Councillor Moore and Councillor Firth. Do you want to introduce them?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Firth, substituting for Councillor Sokal.
Thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting. Is everybody happy with those minutes? Any comments or anything to raise? Okay. So, okay, declarations of interest and lobbying. Councillor Firth, anything?
None, Chair.
Sorry. Can't find the number. Apologies. Item 10. I've been lobbied by local people and just acknowledged and etc. The usual thing. I haven't expressed an opinion.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Thompson.
None, Chair.
Councillor Armour.
Yes, Chair. I received a telephone call at the weekend regarding the Bromley Farm application, which is 2023/91280 and page 31 of this pack. I advised the caller that I would make any decisions on the basis of evidence brought to this committee and not on anything else. So I don't know whether the call was coming to the committee or not.
For me, so item 10, I was contacted by, someone on behalf of the applicant who was making comments as to whether it should be coming to the committee. And then I've just had the documents you've sent through to us, Sheila, from objectors. Okay. So admission of the public, it's a public meeting. Welcome everybody from the public who's here. Obviously when we get to the item, some people will be speaking and we'll explain the procedures when we get to that point. Public question time. Any public questions received?
No questions, Chair.
No deputations or petitions?
No deputations.
Okay, so we'll move on to the planning applications. So we did undertake 2 site visits this morning, so we'll go straight into the applications. We're going to change the running order slightly. Councillor Pinnock, I know you've arrived now, but we agreed to sort of slightly change the order, so if that's okay, we'll just not to confuse anybody. We'll start with application 11, if that's okay with everybody, which is the quarry site. So, Fazana, I'll hand over to you, if that's all right.
Thank you, Chair.
It's having some technical issues. 1 minute.
There we go. There we go. It's all right. There you go. Yeah, that's fine. From beginning. From beginning. Fazana to Person Planning Case Officer for this application. This is a full planning application for a new quarry to extract minerals and incidental coal over a period of 25 years and restore the site by means of importing inert waste materials. The application is brought to the Strategic Planning Committee as a significant number of representations are received, contrary to the recommendation for approval. The application red line relates to an area of approximately 8.4 hectares of land with access shown to be taken off Barnsley Road. The nearest residential areas to the site are Upper Cumberworth to the west, here, and Lower Cumberworth to the east, here, with the nearest properties located along Cumberworth Lane to the north, the closest property being Laneside Farm, as shown here, part of which is listed. This is approximately 60 metres to the northwest of the proposed mineral extraction area. South of the site lies a household waste recycling centre. This is also served by Barnsley Road. The site is in an area of green belt, as identified by the green on the plan to the right-hand side, and also forms part of a larger mineral extraction allocation on the local plan, as identified by the dotted area. The purple lines on this plan relate to public rights-of-way, PROWs, and as can be seen here, one of these across the existing access road at this point here. There is an existing soil bund and wooded area at this point here. This was pointed out to members this morning. This is more clearer on one of the photos on the next slide. Immediately to the south of the site is an area of Kirklees Wildlife Habitat Network, hatched in orange, as shown on this plan. These are a couple of photos taken from within the site. The photo on the right hand shows the mound and wooded area. This is the mound, and this is the wooded area I previously referred to along Cumberworth Lane. The top left photo is taken from within the site. The one below shows an existing access onto Cumberworth Lane to be permanently closed. The photo on the left is where the proposed access will be taken from the existing access road. Again, this was pointed out to members on the committee site visit this morning. The proposals are detailed in paragraph 3.1 of the committee report. In brief, this will involve creation of a new access track, additional soft planting adjacent to Cumberworth Lane and to the existing PROW, widening of the existing access roads to 6 metres, stripping of soils and creation of screening bunds, the extraction of minerals and incidental coal to be split into 5 phases referred to as cuts to a depth of 16 metres, restoration of the site with imported waste back to near original land levels with grass, shrub and tree planting. The operations will involve 120 HDV movements per day, 60 in, 60 out, and the proposed operating hours are Monday to Friday, 7:30 to 6 p.m, and Saturday, 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. The block plan, the block plan on the right indicates the strip soil. On the right indicates the soil mounds to be stored along the northern and the eastern boundary of 5 metres high, with overburden to be stored in the southeast part of the site until backfilling commences within the extraction phase 3, at which time the overburden and the incidental coal will be used to backfill the quarry void. This plan on the left shows a section of the proposed access road, at which point where it would join the existing access road, with a new screen mound to be formed from the stripped soils between the proposed access road and the existing PROW here. The plan on the right demonstrates a vehicle swept path of how the site is to be accessed by HGVs. This is a plan indicating the areas along the access road from Barnsley Road to be widened to 6 metres, and the plan on the right is the revised HGV routing plan showing the use of A roads only. The top left plan indicates where the section is taken from along Cumberworth Lane in relation to the right-hand side plan, which gives an indication of the existing levels outside the site. Yeah, this is agricultural land and this is Cumberworth Lane. And the proposed extraction depth, which will be 16 metres, along with the height of the screen mound, 5 metres here, which will screen the HGV movements and operations when viewed from along the northern boundary. These are the proposed landscaping restoration plans. This plan includes spot levels, which will require the site to be completed near to its original land levels, and the addition of trees, shrub planting along the northern and southern boundaries, an area of species-rich grassland, and the central part of the site to be restored back to agricultural grassland. This historical aerial view is to give an indication of the previous 2 former quarries which are now fully restored. This is immediately adjacent to the proposed quarry, and this is one of the larger quarries that was previously worked and now restored. A total of 290 objections are received, responses to which are included in the committee report and the update. 1 petition with 152 signatures. Further comments from Councillor Tim Bamford received yesterday referred to in the committee update, in addition to his earlier comments, and 1 letter of support. The site forms part of a larger area, in terms of the principle of development, the site forms part of a larger area of an accepted mineral allocation site on the local plan. The MPPF advises that it is essential that there is a sufficient supply of minerals to provide the infrastructure, buildings, energy and the goods that the country needs. It also indicates that minerals are a restricted natural resource and can only be worked where they are found. Paragraphs 10.5 to 10.11 of the committee report sets out the acceptability of the proposals in principle, as it would maintain a supply of raw material for an established clay products manufacturer and maintain an identified need. The impact on the openness of the Greenbelt and the very special circumstances in relation to the modest harm from the proposed 5-metre bunds, along with a cumulative impact on the character area landscape of the surroundings, taking into account a number of operational quarries in the vicinity of the application site, is considered in paragraphs 10.12 to 10.28 of the committee report. In summary, the development proposals are considered acceptable in principle, and the recognised modest harm from the proposed 5-metre high bunds is considered to be outweighed by the very special circumstances put forward by the applicant. The proposals are temporary and reversible in that once mineral extraction has ceased, the whole site will be restored. It is therefore considered that this proposal would not have a significant long-term impact on the openness of the Greenbelt. Turning to environmental ecology landscape issues, notwithstanding the matter of the protected species, which is addressed in paragraph 10.37 of the committee report, the Council's Ecology Officer, on assessment of the submitted preliminary ecological appraisal, agrees with its findings that overall the site is of low ecological value. The submission documents also includes biodiversity net gain calculation, which indicates an excess of the required 10% biodiversity net gain. This is detailed in paragraph 1039 of the committee report. Subject to appropriate conditions, including fencing along the root protection areas to trees on the adjacent Kirklees Wildlife Habitat Network and additional planting trees, hedges along gaps along the boundary with Cumberworth Lane and adjacent to the Prow, the proposals would accord with policies, local plan policies LP 23, 24, 30, 31, 33 and 37 and guidance in the MPPF. With regard to residential amenity, the impact on amenities of the nearest noise-sensitive properties has been considered in the revised noise impact assessment and the dust management plan, which include measures to be carried out during operations. Officers are satisfied these measures, along with the wheel wash facilities and the suggested noise conditions by environmental health, the proposals would not be harmful to the living conditions of existing nearby sensitive receptors and would therefore comply with relevant objectives of the local plan policies LP24 and 52, as well as guidance in the MPPF. With respect to all other matters, subject to conditions suggested by consultees, there are no concerns in relation to air quality, surface water drainage, flooding, impact on significance of the listed building. If I can now pass you on to my highway colleague before concluding.
Thank you, Fazana. From a highway perspective, I think a lot has been covered, but essentially the quarry is served by the existing access road, which currently serves the household waste site and former quarrying in that area. The access to the quarry itself is taken from this access road. The plans that have been shown show that that can accommodate. That's been designed, the junction of that, to accommodate the vehicles that were likely to access the quarry. For the first 50 metres of this will be hard surface in a reinforced concrete surfacing and will include a wheel wash to avoid mud and debris being brought onto the access track. The access track itself, which has operated for numbers of years serving quarries and the household waste, is actually to be widened slightly to 6 metres. This will allow a car to pass a HGV on the track and 2 HGVs to pass with care, where currently they rely on passing places to pass. Once onto the wider network, there's been agreed a routing to the plant in Barnsley using A roads rather than unsuitable or less suitable A roads, unclassified roads. That a route has been agreed and conditioned. That passes through 2 of the junctions, which is the Sovereign and New Mill junctions. Those have both been assessed with the impact of this traffic on those junctions, and they both operate, well, in peak times they will operate close to maximum capacity, but will operate acceptably during the rest of the day. From a highway point of view, the impact on the network is not considered severe and is acceptable. Thank you.
To conclude, the proposals are recommended for approval subject to the amended recommendation as set out in the committee update, which requires the applicant to submit a unilateral undertaking to ensure the incidental coal extracted is not exported off-site and will be reused to backfill the quarry void. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So we'll come on to now the public contributions. So first, so you'll have 3 minutes to speak, and there's a clock there. If you're speaking after 3 minutes, I will have to then ask you to conclude what you're saying. So the first person will be Sheila Locke. You've got 3 minutes when you're ready.
Okay, well, firstly, thank you very much for allowing us to come along today. I've chaired the Commonwealth Quarry Action Group since its inception. I'm here today representing the community. Please don't take the fact that there's only 2 of us to be in any way representative of the strength of feeling. People object to this development in the strongest possible terms. It's not about the quarrying in isolation. It's also about the fact that we've had multiple development in our locality, all of which add up. So the developments in Skelmanthorpe, Barnsley Road, Shepley developments, all bring with it a cumulative impact. And it's our assertion that there is no cumulative impact assessment in this application. I draw your attention to the recent Planning Inspectorate's judgment in relation to Worcestershire and Lee Castle Farm, which clearly indicated that cumulative assessments are a part of any successful application. The factors that we've got severely impact on the quality of life of residents, and we either have excessive HGVs or we have cars running through rat runs trying to avoid HGVs. And we also have increased noise and dust. We're very concerned that we have repeatedly tried to assuage our fears by talking to the applicant, but despite repeated requests to engage with the community, that has not happened. There are a couple of things I want to say specifically. Firstly, the noise assessment that has been completed in this case is woefully inadequate. To assess a development over 25 years by undertaking a 2-hour assessment in the community of background noise doesn't comply with the Environmental Management Assessment Guidelines. We've asked on 2 occasions for that to be corrected. But not only is the short duration of concern to us, We're also concerned that the conclusions that are being drawn do not adhere to the standards set out in that guidance. Secondly, we're really concerned about the vehicles being used. The fact that over the last few days we've still been concerned as to the nature and type of vehicle that is going to be used for this development. And clearly that affects greatly local people. Just to put 120 additional vehicles through the Shepley and New Mill junctions is unacceptable. Can I draw members' attention to the fact that we have a petition, an online petition, which has in the last 24 hours garnered over 1,000 signatures. I think it's up to 1,400 because people are so concerned. It's all very well talking about avoiding Car Hill Road, but the reality is that when you see 120 vehicles passing up the road, other cars will use that as a rat run. There is no access, no pedestrian safe access in that way, and people are obviously very concerned. You'll hear a lot about the National Planning Framework, but actually we think there are breaches to that.
Thank you, Sheila. Now, Bill Shaw, you've also got 3 minutes. Off you go.
The reason for my objection talk today is the community's concern for health and safety regarding the site access from the A635 Barnsley Road up to and including the quarry site entrance. There have been a considerable amount of drawings and statements produced that either show or state a major concern for health and safety. Some of the statements are incorrect, ambiguous, and when questioned have never been answered by Kirklees Council. In your Planning Committee report on page 59, you have made a statement. It is important to note that the site operator has a duty of carrying out safe working procedures as required by the Quarries Regulations 1999. This is a statutory requirement. Likewise, and what is not mentioned in the report, is the responsibility of Kirklees Council to their duty of care. Now, 44-tonne articulated lorries and public vehicles are being used on the same access road. The HSE document, Vehicles and Edge Protection, states that transport account for 40% of all accidents in quarries and 60% of all deaths. The entrance to the quarry begins from the A635 Barnsley Road, and the access road is not complying with HSE recommendations. Referring to page 60 of your report, it highlights Kirklees Council attitude towards health and safety. It does not identify people at risk, identifiable hazards, and control measures that need to be put in place. All of these indicate there is a no duty of care by Kirklees Council. My conclusion, I apologise I've been brief today. I would have liked to explain in more detail, but obviously time does not allow. Information has previously sent to Kirklees Council. Not once have we been approached to discuss our concerns. We have demonstrated how statements are either incorrect or ambiguous. As a professional health and safety and road haulage manager, holding all the necessary qualifications with over 30 years working experience in these fields, I believe as a responsible person with a public duty of care, it leaves me no alternative but to contact the Health and Safety Executive to seek their advice. Due to the limited time allowed and not referenced by myself, I totally agree with the concerns of my colleague, Sheila Locke.
Thank you, Bill. So now we've got Mark Barrett, who's speaking on behalf of the applicant. Mark, you've also got 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, councillors and Chair. My name is Mark Barrett from Siltstone Environmental Limited. We're representing the applicant today, Wabbing UK Limited. The application before you is for further clay and shale quarrying up to a total of 760,000 tonnes at the Bromley Farm quarry. The material will supply clay minerals to manufacture pipes in the main at the Hazelhead Works, and those pipes are marketed extensively to residential and industrial construction building companies, very much particularly for brownfield development sites, which, as we all know, is going to be very important over the next 5 years with 1.5 million homes to build. Restoration is by means of importing inert material once the minerals have been extracted to achieve, very importantly, the landform back to original ground level. And as has been shown earlier by a plan, the restoration is going to include biodiversity net gain of a significant percentage, including woodland and rich species grassland, and also some agricultural land. So we're seeking planning approval for up to 25 years, that's 2050, and that would produce an average of 30,000 tonnes per annum. This site will, for the long-term future, therefore, support at least 95 full-time jobs directly at the Hazelhead Pipes Work, a very established local and important employer. And by our rule of thumb, a further up to 200 full-time jobs in the local economy, providing subcontracted services to the works and to the quarry itself. Bromley Farm Quarry has been a significant contributor to the clay blend used at the Hazelhead Works. It's normally 50%. It still is at the moment care of stockpiled clay that was worked from the original quarry, but this is obviously running down, and it's important that this permission is hopefully granted shortly. On traffic consultations, our clients recognised the better, more safe use of the A635 across the Sovereign Crossroads, the A629, and then onto Mill Junction, and then the A616, which is all A-class roads. The National Planning Policy Framework introduced a presumption in favour of sustainable development and encourages planning authorities to look positively at the development that provides sustainable economic growth. We hope that the committee will concur with this assessment and vote in favour of the development. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, so that's all the speakers. So over to members of the committee. Anybody have any comments? Councillor Firth.
Chair, there were a number of points raised by the objectors, which I'm sure our officers would like to address.
Yeah, I think there was some points in relation to the noise assessment and also the HGV safety points. So if, I don't know, between two of you could potentially answer those. Yep, Fazana.
Through you, Chair. So the noise impact assessment was revised during the course of the application. The application form includes a declaration which the applicant is required to confirm that, to the best of the applicant's knowledge, any facts stated are true, accurate, and opinions given are the genuine options of the persons giving them. The applicant has signed the declaration, and in this case, the council do not have any reason to question this unless presented with evidence to suggest otherwise. With regards to the revised noise impact assessment and the dust management plan, Environmental Health have reviewed this again in light of the more recent objection in the PowerPoint received just a day ago, referring to noise concerns, and their position is that the recommendation stands and they've assessed it appropriately. Thank you, Chair.
Yep.
Right. To try to pick up on some of the other points that members made, that the objectors made. As far as the vehicle types are concerned, their consultant has confirmed to us that out of the 120, potential 120 maximum per day, around 5% would be articulated vehicles. The remaining 95% would be 20-ton rigid quarry type vehicles. The other point was cumulative impact. Yeah, as part of the assessment process, we obviously reviewed committed development in the area and whether that would have what sort of an impact that would have. So that is taken into consideration as part of our assessment process when we were doing that. The reference to the health and safety executive and requirements, we consider that to mean vehicles within the quarry, not vehicles travelling to and from the quarry. You know, the roads that they're using and the access itself are capable of accommodating normal road-going vehicles. The health and safety executive requirements for quarries are for, in my consideration, are for quarry vehicles operating within the quarry, which would come under the operator's responsibility.
Thank you. Any other members? Councillor Armour?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I could do with a little bit of a geography lesson. We're told that this will provide, I think it was 97 jobs at the Hazelhead Works. I'm not sure which part of Kirklees Hazelhead Works is in. In fact, I believe it's in Barnsley. So this is an economic benefit to Barnsley, but not to Kirklees. Am I correct in thinking that?
I think you're correct in thinking that if economic impacts stop at boundaries of council areas, but I'm not sure that they do.
Yes.
Further comment?
On a similar line, we've got this preferred route for the HGVs. It's notoriously difficult for planning to police these preferred routes, so I understand that. It is very difficult. But part of those routes are going to be in South Yorkshire. Have we got any cross-border collaboration between planning authorities so that we can specifically look at any issues about HGVs not using the correct route?
Yeah, I mean, as part of this process, Barnsley Council were consulted. Initially, when another route was being proposed, they did have concerns and they were seeking some financial contributions for maintenance. Now with the agreed A routing, I mean, the bit that goes into Barnsley is the A616 Sheffield Road. They're content with the route that's been agreed. As far as enforcement, if complaints, it's going to be a condition against the route, a plan that will be an approved plan. If there's complaints, obviously enforcement action will be taken.
Thank you.
Yes, just a wee supplementary. If there are complaints actually in the Barnsley area, will Kirklees planning enforcement be following them up, or will Barnsley be following them up?
Yeah, sorry. Well, violations within the Kirklees borough would be done by Kirklees. If it was in Barnsley, it wouldn't be us, no.
Councillor Pinnock, you were next.
Thank you, Chair. Right, I think it was stated fairly early on in Fazana's presentation that where you have mineral resources, they can only really be exploited where they exist. And I realise that those people who live near a quarry site or a potential quarry site may wish they didn't, at least to some extent. But I can't see how we can get round this issue unless there are adequate safeguards for the people who might or will be affected by the activities of this quarry. And this whole area, I mean, I'm slightly more familiar with the area around the Sovereign, but quarrying has been going on for well, possibly 100 years at least, one way or another. Now, whether people have got used to the movement of vehicles to and from those quarries, I can't speculate. But what we do need to ensure is that we do the best we can to stop these things being a real nuisance. And one thing comes to mind straight away, because we went across this particular junction on the way to the site this morning, and that is the routing of the vehicles through New Mill. where the vehicles from the quarry have to make a relatively sharp left turn. And we've already been told that some of these vehicles are going to be articulated. I can't see an articulated vehicle getting round that corner very easily. And even the rigid-bodied vehicles might find it difficult. And given the volume of vehicles proposed to be used from this site, I can see that causing what might be described locally as a nuisance. This is just sort of being pragmatic about it. It does seem to me that junction is a bit of a weak link in the route. I can see why that route is there because the A616 is where I think it's where the Hazelhead works actually is. So that's a logical route, but I'm not sure whether routing the vehicles through New Mill is a particularly good idea. And I'm just desperately thinking. No, I was going to say thinking on my feet, but I know I'm sitting down. But it's going south from the Sovereign. It does cross another road, and I forget which it is. It could go that way instead, and then join the A616. But is that the one that Barnsley have vetoed? So I think I need to get some clarification on that point, please.
Okay. Are we able to? So I suppose the question is, what considerations in the route given to the,
Well, we considered the route that was initially proposed, and we thought it was unsuitable. And the thinking is that we're using the classified A roads, which are the best quality roads in that area. They are capable, or they're the best suited to carry HGV movements. That's why that route was chosen. I mean, vehicles will undertake that movement at New Mill that Councillor Pinnock's spoken about. It may be tight, but that's certainly better than the alternatives, which were some of the unclassified rural roads, which had certainly worse alignments, were narrower, worse alignments, didn't have the sort of, probably the construction to safely accommodate sort of prolonged intense use by quarry traffic. So that's been, there may be parts of that alignment that aren't ideal, but it is the best route in that area to get from those two, between those two, or it's considered to be the best route in that area to get between those 2 points.
Yeah, Councillor P, you want to come back?
Sorry, I want to make clear that I was just talking about A roads when I was musing about it just now, because if you carry on down the A635, as I say, it will eventually cross the is it the A58? No, it's not the A58. 57. You can then get across to the Hazelhead. I just wonder, given that the New Mill Junction is in the middle of a built-up area, I'm just not happy about large numbers of HGVs using that route.
Okay. I'll bring Councillor Thompson in first, and then we can look again.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few questions. Reference to the route. So we've mentioned that it's the best route for who? Is it the best route for the quarry and the wagons, or is it the best route for residents and the users of the road that will be used by the wagons? The old route used to be well used, so is there any reason why it can't be upgraded and reused instead of using the A road that's been planned? Second is the articulated wagons. are we going to put a condition in there that there is hard standing, i.e. flat concrete standing for articulated wagons? Because the loading of an articulated wagon is completely different to a rigid. So have we thought that through? And also it almost seems, as a layman with too little knowledge about it, but working for a haulage company before, is articulated wagons ideally suited for that type of condition anyway, i.e. the ingress and egress of the quarry and getting onto the main A road, as there is several declines with dog legs at the bottom, several dog legs, and then going up to a junction that's on a slight incline. It almost seems out of line in any sort of highways benefit that we would force them onto that road where there is public parking by a pub, and I believe there's a primary school over the other side of the junction. I'm not sure it is ideal. So that's on the decline. What I was thinking about the decline as well is these wagons are probably going to be carrying, I would imagine, if it's a rigid or an Arctic, about upwards of 32 tonne of whatever they're carrying, whether it be clay or aggregate. But they're going to be carrying 32 tonne down a decline and then setting off from a junction on a slight incline with 32 tonne on the back. They're not going to be clearing that junction at any sort of speed that's got to be safe for other users of that road. So I'm not sure that the A road is the best possible route for the other users of the A road, the residents that are using it, the parents that are parking at the Star Pub going over towards the primary school. And especially if you times that by 120, and that's got to be a minimum. I've got enough experience on this panel to know that there's always a low average as far as usage is concerned. So therefore, would it be prudent of us to put some kind of consideration in or condition that maybe Carhill Road has got a tonnage limit on it, maybe 7.5 tonne, and we make the developer look at the old track to make sure it is efficient and it takes the traffic off that junction and that road. I think I've covered all my writing ramblings over the last 10 minutes. So there's some questions there and a possible consideration or condition. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Yeah, Chris.
Through you, Chair. Yeah, don't get me, the quarry would rather use the unclassified roads because it's physically a shorter route because you're cutting across country. The view of the highway authorities that these roads aren't suitable to or safe to carry that, and the inclines and the alignment of those roads are not safe for this type of. The suggestion to use the A roads has come from the highway authority, not from the operator. They would much rather use a shorter route on unclassified roads. As far as Arctics go, I was a little bit surprised when when they confirmed that there would be a percentage and would be Arctics. I would imagine, from my experience working on sites, they can be a bit of a problem because loading them and tipping them on site on uneven ground, they're not very good at that, and they can also get stuck quite easily. Usually it's 8-wheeler rigid tippers or quarry site type vehicles. 95% of them they said is that. I would assume the Arctics are more likely to be used to be bringing inert fill into the restoration rather than taking clay out because they aren't very well suited to site work. But those are the facts we've been given. How they set their site out for loading them in the site will be up to them. But yeah, they want to be careful that they don't tip over when they're loading them, or actually tipping them is the dangerous part. Actually, not loading them. I mean, as far as the drivers, I mean, a lot of HGV drivers, the professional drivers, they should be able to control their vehicle on an A-classified road. you know, if they can't, it beg the question, you know, are they up to the job? You know, if they can't control their vehicle on an A-classified road, the chances of them doing it on an unclassified road are even less.
Matthias, you come in.
So on Car Hill Road, I think that's already got a 3-ton weight limit on it. 3 ton preparing, it's access only, 3 tons are only for access only.
Yep, Matthias.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, councillors, as well for those questions. I think we have to go back to the starting point of what's in front of you and the details of the route. It is a balance, isn't it? There is always balances to strike about directness or quality of road to drive down. And I think that's where we're probably coming from, that we think it's a safer option in the long run, given the lifetime of the development that's being proposed here. And I think it works for both residents and the operator. Although the operator would choose the other route, my view is if you use the best quality roads, given the weather conditions and the changing circumstances, that is the best solution for these types of vehicles to travel through. There is no doubt there'll be some impacts, because that's what planning does. You weigh your pros against your cons. So I think in terms of alternatives, they have been explored. They have been discussed with partner colleagues across boundaries. We have got an agreed way forward that we think as a highway authority is the best thing to suggest. The applicant has acquiesced to that, although that wasn't their choice. They have acquiesced to that. And it's a more manageable routing system in the long term. And I think we have to think about the duration of the planning permission here. So that would be my advice to members to just weigh up. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. I feel that if we were looking at this application with a route along the unclassified network, we'd be asking them to go away and look at a different route. So I think it's a difficult one. Yeah, Councillor Firth.
Thank you, Chair. Mine is not about highways. I'd like to go back to the site itself. It's been mentioned about the dust and the noise. I'd like the officer to explain in a little bit more detail the height of the bunds and the screening which will take place, and how hopefully that will protect the environment for the people that actually live there.
Fazana.
Through you, Chair. So the soil mound along the northern boundary and the eastern boundary here, shown in green, they will be 5 metres high of subsoil and topsoil, and this plan shows a screen mound here along the adjacent proposed access road. That's going to be, well, it's shown as 3 metre high, with additional tree planting on the left-hand side between the existing prow and the proposed access road.
Through you, Chair, did you not say there were some gaps in there this morning?
Sorry, yes. So along Cumberworth Lane, the northern boundary, we drove past on Cumberworth Lane. There are some existing gaps between the tree planting and the hedgerow. The applicant is agreeable for a condition for additional tree planting and hedgerow where required along Cumberworth Lane, this northern boundary, to close those gaps. There's also an existing access, which I think was pointed out to the members this morning. That's shown to be permanently closed as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Anything?
Am I right in assuming, through you, Chair, that these bunds and the extra screening, the new tree planting, you intend planting lots of trees, I believe, or the operator will help alleviate that dust and the noise to a great extent?
Through you, Chair. Yes, so Environmental Health have not really raised any concerns in terms of noise and dust because the properties along Cumberworth Lane are of sufficient distance away. But the additional tree planting and the earth mound along here, adjacent to the prow, will add that added security in terms of noise and dust travelling further. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, well, Councillor Thompson, then we need to come to some sort of decisions.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Just one ambiguous question, if that's okay, just satisfy my curiosity. If the old track that was used for many years for ingress and egress of the quarry was in better condition, would it be the better route for the wagons for the new quarry?
I'm not... Sorry, can you answer? I don't really understand.
I think by that you mean the more direct cross-country route on London. Those routes, the rates, the alignment and the width of those routes, they're not suitable really. You know, two vehicles. There's parts of those routes where two vehicles can't pass each other. So even though it may have been used in the past, they certainly would not be ideal routes to be using. Or hence we've gone for the A road.
Okay, Councillor Armour.
Yes, thank you, Chair. There does seem to be a little bit of contradiction within the paperwork, and I'm just a little bit worried. We've had the bunds mentioned, the topic raised, and paragraph 1013 on page 47, the first clause of the first sentence is, as mineral extraction may not be inappropriate, provided openness is preserved. And it does seem to me that these bunds are in danger of not preserving the openness. There seems to be a contradiction there. I wonder if the planners would like to tell me about it.
Do you want to copy that?
Yeah, I'll have a look. In the end, they're going to be earth mounds, aren't they? They provide a range of security for residents and nearby users who are going to go near the quarry, that it screens the activity. So that test really is more about what the impact on the landscape is from the excavation of the quarry bowl itself, which is the bulk of the alteration to openness. So actually screening with a small bund and a bit of planting at the top will mean that you don't have significant views of this open quarry, and therefore openness is more preserved by a bit of screening. So I think that would be how I would articulate it, Councillor.
Well, I think we should say as well, for when we went on the visit this morning, that, you know, there's already some bunds in place on Cumberland Lane, so we could see what that was like, and it, you know, yeah. Okay, so I think we've had quite a long discussion on this. So I'd suggest if members have said their views, whether they've got a view on to take us forward.
Chair, I'd like to move the recommendation, please.
Moving the officer's recommendation. Okay, Councillor Lawson.
I'll second it.
Okay. So we've had the officer's recommendation moved and seconded, so I think we can vote on that now, Sheila.
So you're voting on the officer's recommendation to approve, subject to the conditions in the report, and also securing a unilateral undertaking from the applicant in respect of the coal extracted from the site not being exported. Councillor Firth.
For.
Councillor Lawson.
For.
Councillor Pinnock.
Against.
Councillor Thompson.
Against.
Councillor Armour.
I'm against.
Councillor Homewood.
For.
That's 3 votes for, 3 votes against. Do you have a casting vote?
I'll vote for.
That's carried.
Okay. Thank you, members. Thank you. We'll go back to item 10 now, I think. Okay, so just trying to work out where we are on the agenda now. So we're going to go back to agenda item 10, if that's okay. Does anybody need 5? You're all okay? Yep. Yeah, go for it. If you want to, yeah. Give it 1 second while people are leaving. Thanks everybody. A quick break. We're just going to restart now on item 10, which is the land at Merchant Fields. Hand over to Victor. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Victor Grayson, Development Management Master Planner in the Majors and Minerals team. This is an application for full planning permission for the development of an attenuation basin and associated access relating to a previously approved planning permission at land at Merchant Fields Farm off Hunsworth Lane, Clackheaton. The main part of the application site where the attenuation basin is proposed is a field to the east of Merchant Fields Farm and to the north of Brookfield View. The application site red line boundary also includes the route of an access between the proposed basin location and Hunsworth Lane. The main part of the application site is grassed land that has been in agricultural use. This is the main part of the application site where the basin is proposed. Members can see that it is, as said earlier, a field previously in agricultural use, and in this image you can also see the gable end of 77 Brookfield View, which is to the south of the main part of the application site. And then in these 3 images, the top image is a panorama panning from the view looking north to the left there, across to the view looking south to the right, and again in the distance you can see properties on Brookfield View. The bottom left image is another view looking south, and in that image, members, you can see that there's a slight slope downhill from west to east across the main part of the application site. And then finally in the bottom right is an image of Nanhall Beck, which runs along the eastern edge of the main part of the application site. In this slide on the right, in the plan shown is an extract from our online mapping system. The larger orange shape is site allocation HS96, where planning permission has previously been granted for a development of 291 dwellings. The main part of the current application site is within the green belt, that's shaded green in this plan. There's a public footpath between the main part of the application site and the site allocation HS96, that's the purple line running roughly north-south. Just regarding the fact that the main part of the application site is within the green belt, and regarding the principle of development, the MPPF says engineering operations such as the basin proposed are not inappropriate in the green belt. The inset plan to the right shows the locations of 4 mine shafts. The implications of these were considered under the previous application for residential development. And this is the 291 dwelling development that was previously approved. Members, please note the 2 buried attenuation tanks that were approved as part of that scheme. Those are annotated on this plan and they are shown as blue rectangles. One of those buried tanks, the northeastern tank, would be replaced by the basin that's now proposed. And then the inset plan on this slide shows detail of what was approved in the nearest part of that development, namely open space, including a community orchard and part of the important hedgerow that is being relocated within that site. And this is the proposed basin. The plan on the left shows that the basin would have raised banks around it, most prominently on its eastern side due to the existing topography. An access track would loop around the basin and a short length of new track would extend to this from the approved development's nearest estate road. The basin would normally be dry, but has been designed to accommodate a water depth of up to 1.65 metres. The proposed raised banks would typically rise less than 1 metre above the existing ground level, and members can see the existing ground level shown in the 2 typical sections on the right-hand side of this slide. Appropriate landscaping is proposed within and around the basin. The plan on the right illustrates how the connecting track would pass through one of the residential development's open spaces to connect to the development's estate roads. And then finally, members, I'll show 2 slides that were not included in those circulated last week. Firstly, this slide is an extract from a recently submitted boundary treatment plan that confirms that the basin will be fenced off with appropriate 1.2 metre high timber post and rail fencing, and that's shown with a dotted blue line around the basin. The fencing would be erected at the foot of the basin's raised banks. The plan also shows the warning signage that the applicant is proposing to install around the basin. And as set out in the committee report, the basin is not intended to be accessible to the public. And then finally, this is an image of an open attenuation basin that's currently under construction at Homedale Court in Linthwaite. It does look pretty messy at the moment. It is under construction still, but essentially this would operate in the same way as what's proposed at the Merchant Field site. 9 representations have been received in relation to the current application, all raising concerns regarding the proposed development. These include the comments of Councillor Kath Pinnock, who has asked for the application to be considered at committee. Regarding the concerns raised, it is considered that public safety has been adequately addressed by the proposed boundary treatments, warning signage, lack of public access to the water's edge, and the basin's 1 in 3 sloped edges, as well as the fact that the basin would not normally be full of water. And in addition, this morning the applicant submitted additional information in the form of a report prepared by the Royal Society for the Prevention of Accidents, which concluded that the basin would have a lower risk level rating, the rating of 2 in ROSPA's scale of 1 to 6, 1 being the lowest risk, 6 being the highest risk, if certain measures were implemented, such as the previously mentioned fencing and 1 in 3 sloped edges. Maintenance and management arrangements would be secured via a recommended condition, and these arrangements would need to include inspection, weeding and sediment and debris removal. Regarding flood risk, the basin would essentially do the same job as the previously approved buried tank would have, but further downstream. There is no evidence to suggest this basin would increase flood risk or increase the likelihood of the flooding incidents that have occurred to the south of this site. The proposed development would be subject to the now mandatory 10% biodiversity net gain requirement, and amenity, highways and other material planning considerations have been addressed or would be addressed at condition stage, and approval of full planning permission is recommended subject to conditions, including the 2 conditions listed in yesterday's committee report and committee update, which replace 5 of the previously recommended conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So we'll go to speakers on this item. So Councillor Kath-Pinnock, we'll come to you first, and you've got up to 5 minutes to...
Is that all?
That's all.
Thanks very much, and thanks for the introduction from the planning officer. The issue, there's three big issues for me. The first one is the principle of the development in the green belt. When the site was allocated for housing, actually for 400 units, we're now down to 291, there was space allocated on the site for an attenuation tank. And that has been approved. What is not clear to me is why the applicants, and there's no justification that I've heard in the presentation, nor in the committee report, as to why the attenuation tank on the allocated site is no longer they've decided they would rather not build that and put one in the green belt outside their allocated site. That, to me, there is currently, I don't see a justification. I hear what the planning officer has said, which is that it's permittable, you can do it under the MPPF. However, that doesn't provide the justification for doing it when there was already a plan that worked. So what I need to hear is what is the justification for it. The second issue for me is about the design of the attenuation basin, if it goes ahead, because these basins ought to be adopted by Yorkshire Water for, the 50, 100-year life of these things. So the question is, does the design of the attenuation basin fit the design principles and requirements of Yorkshire Water, which are on site? I've had a look at them, and I don't think they do. But that's a question, and they ought to be required to do so for the future of this, if it goes ahead. The next issue I want to raise is about accessibility. Now, all along it says, I think even the planning officer said it's not meant to be accessible. Well, no, it isn't meant to be accessible. It doesn't mean to say it won't be, especially when there is a public right-of-way on one of the edges of the attenuation basin and a vehicle access, inevitably, into the attenuation basin, and a post and rail fence, which is easy to climb over. I mean, that's an added excitement if you're a child to do that. So what really concerns me is that if there is a depth of water of 1.65 metres, which is higher than I am, and children are always attracted to water, and dogs particularly are attracted to water. If they get in, how are they going to get out? ROSPA on their site, I know they've sort of claimed that it's okay. ROSPA on their site say there ought to be in basins an area which is 1 in 5, so that it's much easier to get out. And there also ought to be, as well as danger warnings, there ought to be a life buoy, it seems to me, because it's going to be a big site, either 1 or 2 around the site, in case of any disasters. Remembering that this is next to a big site of family housing. And that's where children will go. They will. And, that's what kids do. A I think the last point I want to make really is that about the there's question marks around net gain, biodiversity net gain in there. That's we need, and another loss of another hedgerow for the sake of a basin when it should be. We should make them keep to the attenuation tank. They've had this permission for 3 years. They need to get on and build it. And the company who have responsible for this application have not the best of reputations around the place for fulfilling the conditions of planning applications. And I know other members on this committee, because I spoke to them yesterday, know that this is the case. So what I want to see, if there is a determination to allow a development in the green belt which is not needed, then I want to see that it complies with the Yorkshire Water Design Principles and requirements, and I want to see better safety provision. Because what I am not going to be responsible for is any accidents in that water in the future. Because the site that you showed on there for Lindswaite is not going to be 1.65 metres depth.
Yep.
Is it? No.
Thank you. Got it. Thank you, Councillor Pinnock. We'll come back to some of those questions in a minute. I'll bring the other speakers in first, and then we'll go back to some of those points. So next to speak, we've got Mr. Rankin. There you go. You'll have 3 minutes to speak, and you'll have it'll be on that clock for you. So off you go.
Okay, I'm ready now. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, committee members, this statement will address objections to the proposed attenuation basin. Full amplification is given in my main statement plus photographs. The main objection to this proposed feature is that periods of high rainfall and peak flow on Maysbrook and Nanhall Beck, the attenuation basin will be inundated by river flooding and do nothing to contain surface water runoff from the proposed development. The lowest point of the attenuation basin is only 3 feet 7 inches above normal river flow. The highest point is 11 feet above normal river flow. At periods of peak river flow, Maysbrook can be 8 or 10 feet above normal level. The reason is that Maysbrook has a greater elevational drop than Niagara Falls. The result of this inundation will be intensified flow in the topographic basin of Maysbrook, Nanhall Beck, leading to additional flooding in residential properties on and around Brookfield View further downstream, where the flood risk is bad now. There is currently a 1 in 2 year flood risk for residents further down the valley. This proposal for surface water attenuation would add to an existing problem and fail to achieve its stated aim. There must be no additional off-site flooding. The lead local authority in respect to this application have called for depth of flooding risk assessment and an assessment of exceedance events. This demonstrates sound thinking. If the effectiveness of this proposed feature cannot be accurately determined from the statement supporting it on the application, then it can hardly be approved on the basis of theoretical conjecture. The conclusions given in the main statement are based on observation of previously raised river level and analysis of why this feature will be inundated by it. 2 previous applications for large-scale development on this site were rejected due to aggravation of flooding in the Spen Valley. This has not been communicated to the Planning Committee by the Kirklees Planning Authority at any time during the current scenario. The current flooding problem must not be used to disguise additional flooding from the proposed new development, which is inevitably what will happen if this feature is approved. What is required is a complete reappraisal of the entire surface water attenuation and flooding issue. I find it incredible that after nearly 6 years of the current scenario, this issue is still no nearer being resolved. I would suggest that the entire community infrastructure levy be used towards off-site flood prevention measures and integrated with surface water attenuation from the proposed site. Additionally, infrastructure upgrade in respect to flood prevention financed by highway contributions from the developer under Section 278 of the Highways Act 1980 should also be sought by the local authority. Unless and until there is a serious integrated approach by the local authority and the developer in respect to the flooding issue overall, any such subpar measures such as this should be refused. Thank you very much.
And now, on behalf of the applicant, we've got John Beeson. Right, John, you've also got 3 minutes when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. This application is submitted for consideration providing an alternative drainage solution to that that's already been approved under the application referred to by the case officer, providing 291 new homes to the northwest. The features such as this are increasingly commonplace in new development and provide a more natural feature than a buried tank solution. There are ecological benefits to constructing a basin instead of a tank solution, as they allow more diverse planting opportunities and habitat creation. In this case, it would provide a distinct permanent landscaped feature as a defensible boundary and transition between the new residential development it serves and the open countryside to the east. Regarding the points that have been raised in advance of the committee, I confirm we are prepared to provide a slightly adjusted access arrangement within the main site to accommodate access more readily by the maintenance and, should the need arise, emergency vehicles. By agreement with officers, we propose that this is achieved by way of a Section 96 application, which is possibly capable of securing by way of a condition attached to any approval to this consent. Regarding comments about the capacity of the attenuation basin, the proposed basin is designed to allow for the reprovision of surface water attenuation in lieu of one of the approved tanks on the main site and a reduction in the capacity of one of the other tanks on the approved site. My colleague from the engineering team is accompanying me today should members have any specific technical questions regarding the design of the facility itself. In short, in addition to the proposed reprovision from the approved tanks, the capacity also allows for additional storm events and urban creep. This should allay concerns raised in some of the public comments regarding localised flooding events, though I must stress that the design drainage solution is only required to meet the needs of the development it's serving and not to address pre-existing conditions. Safety concerns have been raised by Councillor Pinnock, and we've taken these on board and we've proposed some measures in addition to the report that we've provided today. Again, I'd stress that this facility is to be sited on private land. Notwithstanding that, we are addressing the points raised in the ROSPA report with respect to the safety concerns that have been raised. One additional benefit to the creation of a basin over an attenuation tank is the reduction in the number of HGV delivery vehicles to the site, which would otherwise be required to form the proposed and approved tanks. So for the reasons set out by the case officer and for the reasons alluded to here, respectfully ask that members uphold their officer's recommendation and approve the application subject to conditions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So Victor, just to come back to some of the comments made, and if you can comment on, so we had around the development in the Greenbelt and justification for that, as to is justification required, I mean in terms of the design and the safety elements, accessibility, should there be things like life floats, etc., net biodiversity net gain, and also then the points on flooding. So I don't know if you want to try to cover those points if possible.
Through you, Chair, I'll try. Just in terms of justification, this applicant isn't required to provide a justification or an explanation as to why they're now proposing a basin instead of one of the previously approved tanks. The question for the local planning authority is not is this justified? It is instead, is this development appropriate at this site in the Greenbelt? And you assess that based on the merits of the scheme rather than reference to what was previously approved in the main development site. And obviously the officer recommendation is that it is appropriate development within the Greenbelt as confirmed in the MPPF. I do happen to know though that and this came up in discussions with Harron Homes, that it is cheaper to provide this basin than it is to provide the buried tank that was previously approved. That is, I understand, the justification behind Harron's change in proposals. And that happens all the time. Developers constantly value engineering their schemes, figuring out ways of saving money in development, especially in these times where inflation has inflated development costs significantly. There's no planning reason for opposing that unless there is unless that change in proposals causes problems relative to one of the relevant planning considerations. In terms of the design and this basin possibly being adopted by Yorkshire Water or one of the alternative organisations that can take on responsibility, the council doesn't require drainage infrastructure to be designed and specified to an adoptable standard. It requires the drainage scheme of a development to be adequate to serve its purpose and to not increase flood risk, but the council does not require those aspects of a development to meet all the requirements of Yorkshire Water. Yorkshire Water haven't commented on whether or not they'll adopt this basin, and they don't usually do at application stage. They'll need a lot more far detailed technical information before they make that decision, and they might ultimately decide not to adopt this basin. They're not obliged to. If that happens, then responsibility for the basin would remain with the development's management company, the same company that will be responsible for unadopted estate roads within the development, public open spaces, and so on. In terms of access, the applicants have said that public access would not be allowed to the basin, to the water, and to the access track and raised banks around the basin. A 1.2 metre high fence is proposed to restrict access, but children or any persons could climb over that fence. That is possible. There's no denying that. Biodiversity net gain, that's to be dealt with via the statutory imposed condition. Now that we're in that situation since last year when the Environment Act introduced that requirement, and that's dealt with by a condition automatically imposed by the government on any planning permissions submitted after February of last year. I think those were all the points, Chair. Or?
We're just on the flooding point.
Flooding. Well, like I said earlier on, there's no evidence that this basin would worsen local flood risk or would be any worse than the scheme that was previously approved by this council. If we do have a member of staff from the League Local Flood Authority to speak on the application if need be, if you have technical questions or further questions.
Can I just clarify two things in what you said? So in terms of the question on Greenbelt, are you saying that if you've got two alternatives, one can be delivered, one is in the Greenbelt, one's not in the Greenbelt, that isn't a consideration at all?
Well, you don't actually have that question in front of you, Chair. This planning committee's made a decision already on the residential development that's been approved, and now there's a new question as to whether or not this development is appropriate in the Greenbelt. That's the only question that this committee needs to concern itself with, not whether or not one is better than the other. The question to ask is this development acceptable in the Greenbelt?
Okay, so we can't put any weight on the fact that there's an alternative that isn't in the Greenbelt. Is that what
I did say in the committee report as well that if, for whatever reason, the applicant decides to develop both, in planning terms, there wouldn't really be a problem with that.
The other question I just want to ask you is when you were saying about the adoptable standards, you said the council doesn't require that. Is that because we just decide not to require that, or can we require that if we wanted to?
So the council as local planning authority and lead local flood authority has duties to make sure that a development like this doesn't increase local flood risk. How that's achieved can be done in various different ways, and that's less of a concern of the council. Whether or not it's achieved through a drainage scheme that is managed and maintained by a management company or by a developer if they want to hold on to the site, or by Yorkshire Water or by one of the other bodies, we're not concerned with that.
I suppose what I'm saying is not so much, you said it's not Yorkshire Water don't have to adopt anyway. I'm just saying if members, for example, wanted to put a condition that it had to be delivered to an adoptable standard, would that be an acceptable condition?
We advise against that, Chair, for the same reason that we no longer recommend conditions requiring roads within a development to be adopted by the local highway authority.
I suppose I'm not asking them to be. I'm not arguing this is the case. I'm just trying to clarify what has been practiced. It's not so much saying that it should be adopted. I get that's not our decision. I'm just saying that I think the point that's being made is, does that not help in avoiding situations where potentially you're left with, something that can't be adopted in the future when it potentially needs to be because there's nobody to maintain it or whatever.
Well, through you, Chair, I can't tell you here and now what Yorkshire Water's requirements are for a basin to be adopted. Those requirements might go far beyond what is needed for this basin to be safe and for it not to increase flood risk. If that's the case, it would be unreasonable for the councillor's local planning authority to go beyond what's the minimum requirement and instead meet the requirements of what is essentially a private company, as Yorkshire Water is.
Okay. Sorry, yeah, just if you can be brief, but if it's on this point, just around what...
Yeah, so if I may, could I ask my colleague to respond on the point regarding the adoption of the facility?
Hello, I'm Engineering Manager for Harron Homes. Just to go on the point of adoptability, all of our sites are proposed for Section 104 adoption, either that being Yorkshire Water or a NAV system. This system's being through technical approval with ICO's Water, so it will be fully up to their standards.
Okay, thank you, that's really helpful. Okay, I'll open up to the members, so Councillor Armour and then Councillor Pin.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I find myself on the very same page as Councillor Cathpin, because what struck me was safety, in particular safety of children. From what I've heard, it seems to be suggested from both sides, actually, that this could be a cheaper option to the original attenuation tank option. But it does appear to me to be suboptimal and very much a more dangerous option. And I am really, really concerned about the danger of children, because a post and rail fence, it's not even going to keep a 6-year-old out. So it is a major, major concern. There is a different engineering approach because the original design was for attenuation tanks instead of this basin. So I am extremely concerned. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Andrew Pinnock.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, there are one or two issues which I think I would like to get cleared up. We've had discussed quite a lot of issues so far, but one of the things that has occurred to me is that this attenuation basin is on the far side, the far eastern side of the site, and as far as I can make out, has no independent access for vehicles of its own. So it does occur to me whether this should be built before the houses, so that and there aren't any roads proposed to get access. So on a practical level, it seems to me sensible that it's built before the houses are, so that you don't have to get access to this site through a half-built or already built housing site. That's the point I'm trying to make. And the other issue was that one of the conditions in the permission for the main site is that a construction environment management plan is required for that. Can the construction environment management plan for this site be incorporated into that, so that the two can be worked together, if you see what I mean, because otherwise you're going to have people having to get access to this site, going, as I say, going through the middle of the half-built housing development, when there aren't any other access, other means of access. I hear what is said about the benefits of doing this as opposed to the tank, and I can see that it would certainly be a cheaper option. One might also say that it is probably ecologically more acceptable, but we have got to have the right safeguards, and that's been emphasised several times this afternoon. One can't emphasise that too much. And I was going to use an example in Councillor Armour's ward in Grangemore, where there's a pond which has got a lot of trees planted in it and around it, so it is actually very difficult to get into. I don't know whether that's an option in this case.
Matthias, you wanted to respond to those points?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Pinnock. I think on the timing, if I just take it in reverse order, my view is you would get going on the development site, because that's actually what this facilitates, isn't it? Let's get these houses built that have been sitting there waiting, and we want Harron to get on with building some good quality houses here. And I would say using the access roads that they build to get to it with a linking application that he's talked about, so there's a direct route to this new attenuation basin, would be the best outcome. Then you've got that permanently there, and it's through new residence roads, not your existing residence roads, because I think your existing residents won't like it. And I care about our residents. So set that to one side. That would be my narrative and suggested way of dealing with the construction. I think the pertinent issue that I'm hearing from members so far, and I appreciate I haven't heard from Councillor Lawson or Firth and the Chair, is about safety and your concern about safety. And, you know, we all have a responsibility in this room to care for our children, vulnerable, and any other users around hazards. So for my money, I would suggest that we do add a planning condition requiring appropriate safety features to be secured, and that could be a life ring, or it could be a warning system, it could be some, I think the fencing they've got delineates, is it appropriate? I think within the reasonableness test of have we acted reasonably as a council without making it a fortress and blocking it off entirely from views and from its ecology but value, an appropriately worded condition that the developer signs up to, which I'm getting some agreement for, would ameliorate that concern. Have we done enough to make it safe and then getting the benefits you've talked about of the ecology? And yeah, it's a bit cheaper, but actually it's better to have water attenuated this way than in a concrete drum under the ground, which comes with its own ecological damage. So if members want that, and that's something you want to consider, then I think we can add that, if that's what you want us to do, Chair, to ameliorate this issue and worry about the safety, because we've talked about the other issues of adoption, I think. Is that helpful, Chair?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it is. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. Just leading on from the safety aspect, I know we've had a few in our ward where we've had certain things turned down, reference to children's safety because of line of sight, because the housing doesn't overlook clearly the potential dangers for the children playing in that area, which it does appear that what we are looking at here is moving it away from a line of sight or the locale of the houses into a more remote area. So I do see that there is a challenge there as far as safety. But then the cynic in me also looks at it and looks at it as far as moving something that is near a road and putting it remotely on, is it green belt? And just wonder how many more houses the developer could get in the plot that they're moving it away from. So is it a safety aspect, or is it the cynic in me that just tells me it's been moved on purpose to allocate more land? I actually work facing this plot, so I see the work going on all the time, and the topography of the place, which is quite a challenge for a developer, I'm sure. So they will be moving around and dancing around on this plot because of the problems that they'll get. But there is a certain amount of the cynicism in me that tells me that it might be moved for other reasons. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Lawson.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. As somebody who actually grew up next to a mill pond, my mother would have probably still had me grounded with all the activities. Water attracts children, and that is, to me, is the main safety concern here. If it is out of the way, I look at sort of say a child gets into danger, gets into the point where they've nearly drowned, somebody's dragged them out. How long would it take paramedics to get to that child? We can screen it off as much as we can, but I do feel it's a question of you don't want a road leading to it because that attracts people to come down, but equally you need something for emergency services to get there, if that makes sense. And that is the one thing I can see as you raise the point of looking at screening it and various things and adding safety concerns. I can see that point, but I'm also looking at how long it would take emergency services to get there.
Thanks for that. So I just had a couple of comments and thoughts to make. So I suppose just the other stuff that was mentioned outside the safety aspects. I feel that, you know, as we know as members of this committee, it's not always about what we like and the approaches that we like. It's what the rules are, and, you know, clearly in this context, you can change your mind on what plans you want to be. You can say, well, actually this green belt option is better for us, and we have to look at it on the grounds of what's there. And I think the contribution was useful around the standards that the bill to. Just on the safety features, I think, Matthias, your suggestion around a condition is really useful, and the reason I'm saying that is because I've heard some things suggested, and for example, Councillor Pinnock, you mentioned, you've seen other ones where there's trees around it and stuff, and I was thinking, well, okay, but what if someone does get into the water? You also want them to be able to get out as well. So I don't know whether we're expert enough to really be judging on what safety features are the most or least safe. I'm also conscious that with your attraction to kids and water, you've got two different things. You've got the problem we get where you have open water and people think it's a good place to swim and things like that. That doesn't seem to be an issue here because that's not the kind of open water that we've got. What we've got is people, maybe younger kids or whatever, being inquisitive or whatever and wandering around. So I guess there's different safety considerations to make. So in that context, a sign might not be particularly, you know, impactful. So I think my suggestion would be that we do look at the condition you've made and also the suggestion that was provided here in terms of the access point for emergency vehicles, etc. Yeah, Councillor Firth.
Thank you. Sorry, I do apologise. What you said were quite right before, and Matthias, eloquent as ever. But the proposal is to put trees, hedgerows and shrub planting around the basin itself. But Councillor Pinnock, the objector in this case, spoke quite eloquently about if anybody gets in, there must be a way to get out. And I think we must, if we do approve this, that must be a condition that the people that get in, the kids get in, there must be a gradient so where they can get out, or even steps. So they've got to be able to get out of the thing if they get in.
Just to add on that, I think on the report, I think Councillor Kathpinnock mentioned 1 in 5 gradient. I think there was 1 in 3 gradients referenced in the report. So, Victor, is that correct?
Yeah, the banks inside the basin would have a gradient of 1 in 3, which ROSPA does recommend is appropriate to enable self-rescue. I haven't heard of ROSPA referring to 1 in 5 gradients, but I take your point, Councillor, if that's on their website, fine. I don't think it'd be too hard to design in areas of 1 in 5 slopes on the inside of the basin if the applicants are open to tweaking their design in places.
Councillor Thompson, and then.
Sorry, just one more thing. The tank, by definition, I'm assuming, is a sealed tank that has an access point that would be secured. And the basin is an open area of water that could be got to quite easily or even difficultly, more difficultly by kids. So if we're looking at the safety aspect, would the project not be better safety-wise to be kept as the tank rather than the basin?
Well, that's, yeah.
You're not being asked that question of one or the other. I think the other point we just need to remember is this basin will be largely dry, apart from occasional times of water where it's filled. It will generally be a dry basin. That is the expectation, but we've got to think about when it's got water in, what are we doing? And that's the safety thing. And this is where that balance comes into, are you acting reasonably? And the debates, the speakers for and against, both reasonable issues being articulated. You as decision makers have got to say, does that condition solve the problem? And if it does, then perhaps that overcomes any nervousness, concern. That's the question I think you've got in front of you at the minute, committee.
Thanks. Just quickly, just because you meant you were going to come in on the gradient point, if you would answer that specific question, that would be helpful.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, the officer kindly pointed out that this is going to be dry for the majority of the time. We have other recommendations in the ROSPA report. Appreciate members may not have seen that, and we would accept that there may be measures in there. I think the only one that we've not addressed is the lifeline, as they refer to it, provision of such a facility to enhance the safety. But they are to an adoptable standard, and we could look at that.
So I think just to make some progress then, I'd be happy to move that we will move the officer recommendation with the additional condition that you suggested, Matthias, which seems to link into that in terms of looking a bit more closely at the safety requirements and having a safety plan linked to that. Is that kind of? And their access from there. Yes, which I think they'd already, which they'd suggested as well. So if we add that as well. Two conditions. Yeah, so that's my suggestion. Councillor Firth, you seconding that? Councillor Pinnock?
Just come back to the point that I was talking about earlier about the timing of building this. That there is probably something in the condition list of conditions that talks about, or it could be reworded so that the timing of the construction of the basin doesn't interfere with what's going on the main site. I know what you're saying about that's the business of this site, but it seems a little odd if you leave something to which the only access is through the main site to the end when most of that's being built. You do it at an earlier stage.
Is that irrelevant? Is that for us to determine? But
I get where you're coming from. I think the difficulty is, as they construct the site, they'll have temporary drainage measures in place to get going and capture the water of any runoff. They've also got a number of other attenuation features on their site which are sunken, which they'll be building. It's really difficult to require them to build this off-site thing first, because what we actually haven't got is which parcel of the site is this water going to capture from and at what stage, how many units do you have to build before you need it?
And actually, sorry, I'm arguing against myself now, but bearing in mind that the land adjacent to this site is actually not part of their site anyway. You know, the bit where Merchant Fields Farm is, so, and the land below it. So
Have you cancelled yourself out?
I'm cancelling myself out, yeah. I thought it was a good idea at the time, though.
So I've moved and we've had a second, so I think we should go to the vote on the proposal now, Sheila, and then we'll see what happens.
So just to be absolutely clear, you're voting on the officer recommendation to approve. That includes the deletion of 5 of the original conditions in the report, and the addition of 2 that were in the update, and an additional 2 in respect of the provision of appropriate safety features and the access. Councillor Firth?
For.
Councillor Lawson?
For.
Councillor Pinnock?
For.
Councillor Thompson?
For.
Councillor Armour?
For.
Councillor Homewood?
For.
That's agreed unanimous, Chair.
Okay, got there in the end. Okay. Right, does anybody need a 2-minute break, or are we okay to carry on? We'll carry on. We'll carry on. You can get water while we're so,
Well,
so we'll just take a 1-minute break.
I can't really. I know we have this discussion sometimes. I can't do that sort of thing, but you know, particularly when it's you know, there are a lot of reasonable arguments put forward.
Right, everyone, thanks very much. Let's welcome back to the meeting. We're going to carry straight on with the final item. That's agenda item 12. It's the dwellings at Cliff Lane. Over to you, Nick.
Thank you, Chair. Good day, members. My name is Nick Hurst, case officer for this application. The proposal before members is seeking full permission for the erection of 97 dwellings with associated works. Access to the site would be via Cliff Lane and by the demolition of number 271 Cliff Lane. There we go. So let's give members a second to look at that. The application is brought to committee due to the level of public objection received and because a reduced Section 106 package is being recommended following a viability exercise. The site is allocated for housing within the local plan, allocation HS116. Part of the allocation is excluded from the application. This can be seen to the east. As identified by the green, the land is to the north, to the north, and west is greenbelt. Of note, there are several trees with tree preservation orders, TPOs, in and around the site. Along the site's north and west boundaries is a public right-of-way denoted by the purple. And to the northeast, denoted by blue, are listed buildings and Gummersall Conservation Area. This image is taken from the western boundary, from the prow, looking into the site. Of note are the rear of the properties on Cliff Lane along the right-hand side of the image. And one of the protected trees is visible. It's not the large central one, that's not TPO'd because it's split in the centre. It's the one just off to the left there. Also of note is the topography of the site, which you can see is steep sloping down. This image is taken from Ferrand Lane, still on the prow, which is with the site being on the right. Ferrand Lane is the route to the north of the site, which the prow continues along. And this final image, again from Ferrand Lane, further to the northwest, again just to note the topography and the relationship of properties backing onto the site. This plan shows the proposed layout. As mentioned, number 271 Cliff Lane would be demolished to provide the point of access. The road would enter into the site before branching approximately centrally. A central area of public open space to accommodate one of the TPO trees is proposed. That can be seen just in this area here. Also, to the north, adjacent to the boundary with Ferrand Lane and the Greenbelt, would be an area of open space. The houses would be a mixture of 2, 3 and 4 bed, with detached, semi-detached and terraces proposed, in addition to 2 apartment blocks with 1 and 2 bed units within. This image shows some of the typical elevations. Materials include render, brick and artificial stone. Some of the properties would be split level, 3 stories and 2 stories, with the apartment blocks being 3. So again, some typical elevations. And finally, an example of one of the apartment blocks. So, as noted by the photos, the site is sloped, and here's a typical method to address the levels. The use of retaining walls, the split level property, is going to address that. Retaining walls would be kept to a minimum in the public realm through having them in gardens and again using those split level properties. So the report before members outlined the officer's full assessment of the proposal. In summary, the proposal seeks a residential development of a housing allocation. The design is considered high quality and would reflect the character of the area. The number of units is appropriate for the density of units is appropriate, as is the mixture proposed. The proposal will not prejudice the amenity of adjacent residents while also securing a high standard of amenity for future occupiers. On the matter of highways, through you, Chair, I'll invite Chris Dowles to speak now.
Thank you, Nick. Through you, Chair. As we members saw this morning, access to the site is from Cliff Lane by a simple priority junction. It's formed by demolishing 271 and incorporating the access to the side, which currently serves Homefield and carries the public footpath down that edge. The access is 6 metres wide with 2 metre footways to either side. The access to the property called Homefield will be via the new access with a spur off of that into the property. The footpath will continue down the edge of the site as it does now. Internally, it's a series of, a sweeping layout with cul-de-sacs that's built to in accordance with the Highway Design Guide. It's a combination of traditional estate roads, shared surface and private drives. The parking provision accords with recommended guidance in the Highway Design Guide. In terms of impact on the network, an assessment was undertaken of the junctions in the vicinity where it's considered, based on the distribution from the site, there would be an impact. A total of six junctions which are listed in the report. All of those were found to operate without acceptable, apart from the Spen Lane, Oxford Road, Church Lane signalised junction, which I think we drove through this morning on our way to the site. That's a signalised junction. That currently operates close to its maximum capacity at peak periods already. It would obviously continue to operate at that level, but there wouldn't be what we call severe impact at that junction that would warrant any further mitigation. So from an impact perspective, it's considered to be acceptable. The roads have been built so they are to an adoptable standard. I think the intention is that the developer would offer it for adoption. In terms of public transport, there's a contribution for some bus stop improvements. It is within just over 400 metres of two sort of high-frequency bus routes on Spen Lane and Oxford Road. I think there's 6 buses an hour between Cleckheaton and Leeds. So it's public transport. Bus would be an option. As part of the layout, it incorporates pedestrian links through to Furren Lane, which takes you, which is a more direct route to the bus stops on Oxford Road. So from an access point of view, it's acceptable. All highway issues are considered to be acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Chair. All of the material planning considerations, such as colline drainage, have been considered and are addressed within the report. In regards to contributions, the application has been through a viability assessment. The applicant's viability assessment has been reviewed by a council-appointed independent assessor. Per the full details in the report, it has been concluded that the site and proposal cannot facilitate a full policy-compliant contribution. This has led to a reduced affordable housing contribution of 16.5% as opposed to the policy expectation of 20%. However, all of the contributions would be paid in accordance with policy expectations. 79 representations expressing concern have been received in response to the proposal across several representation periods following amendments. These are considered and addressed within the report. Therefore, officers recommend approval, subject to securing conditions and a 106 agreement per the amended recommendation in the update. Nothing further to add, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So first, Sheila, you're going to read representation from Councillor David Hall.
Ward councillors opposed this allocation for housing in the local plan, and we still have grave concerns, particularly about the effect on local traffic. I think in early talks with the previous application, there was a view to providing money for improving local road safety, including Latham Lane. Is this still in the agreement? It is also disappointing that this greenfield site is being brought forward for development when locally there are several large brownfield sites, former Gummersall First School, former Aram Grills School, former Hartshead Special School and Westgate Cleckheaton, which have been derelict for years and which the Council should have prioritised as per its policy of brownfield first.
Thank you. And now we've got Emma Winter on behalf of the applicant. You've got 3 minutes to speak when you're ready.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair and members, for allowing me to speak today. Here is an opportunity for you to support a planning application for 97 dwellings on a site allocated for residential development in the local plan. As you're aware, the Council cannot demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, and the delivery of housing within Kirklees has fallen below the 75% housing delivery test requirement. The National Planning Policy presumption in favour of sustainable development is therefore engaged, and this weighs in favour of the application before you today. The site, located on the edge of Gummersall, poses certain challenges, including topography and existing trees. The proposed density, restricted by these constraints, is efficient and an appropriate use of this allocated land. It has been endorsed by council officers. The proposed mix includes detached, semi-detached, terraced houses and apartments. The market housing aligns with the expectations of the Council's Affordable Housing and Housing Mix SPD. A viability assessment has been undertaken and independently assessed, and a reduced Section 106 agreement contribution has been agreed, securing 16 affordable houses. This has also been accepted by officers. The principle of development is therefore considered to be acceptable. The site layout has been carefully designed, with internal road layout following the site's topography and retaining key trees. The scheme has evolved in response to feedback from officers and technical consultees regarding density, drainage, highways, ecology, and protected trees. As a result, there are now no objections from statutory consultees. Concerns raised by local residents within the bungalows on Cliff Lane have also been taken into consideration. In particular, plots 63 to 66 have been moved further to the north, increasing the separation distance between these properties by over 14 metres. The development will not adversely affect the amenity of neighbouring dwellings, a position supported by officers. In conclusion, this proposal offers several key benefits. It delivers much-needed housing on an allocated site, helping address the Council's housing shortfall. It provides 16 much-needed affordable homes. It includes significant contributions to community infrastructure for off-site open space, education, sustainable travel and bus stop improvements. It will achieve 10% biodiversity net gain via a combination of on-site and off-site contributions. The proposal complies with the relevant local and national planning policies and represents sustainable development. For these reasons, I respectfully ask you to support your officer's recommendation and approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, over to members. Any comments? Councillor Firth.
Chair, can you just put the plan or site plan up, please? My first comment is, Chair, that I do like the layout of the site, and I do like the amount of green on the site, which are all gardens, but it really looks good. But can I make a comment on the topography of the site? As we know, it rains, and sometimes that freezes, and we get snow on there. And I just wondered, in the conditions, have you asked the developer, the applicant, to provide grip bins on site? Because I think, if not, we should do. And I think going forward, we should be looking at that as conditioned on all future developments. That's all I've got to say on that, Chair, because I think it's a good one.
Councillor Pinnock.
Apologies. This is, of course, an allocated site where we can be assumed to be generally in agreement. We've been on this site before, or dealt with this site before, and I hope that the problems that we experienced with that developer will not happen again. It does seem to me that quite a lot of thought has gone into the way the site's been designed, and thought given to the fact that there is actually quite a lot of open space, considering the sort of thing we usually get on sites of this kind. I'm also pleased that the footpath that goes from Cliff Lane down towards Fanwood, the Scout and Guide Centre, at least the first bit of it, at any rate, is going to be separated from the vehicle traffic, and I think that's definitely an improvement, because sometimes of the year that's quite heavily used by a lot of pedestrians. I know what I was going to ask. Open space off-site contribution. Has any suggestion been made as to where this is going to happen, please?
Councillor Thompson, do you want to come first, and then we'll cover all the points.
Thank you, Chair. It's interesting to hear the comment that we like it because there's a lot of green on the site, but there was a hell of a lot more before the development would have started. So, yeah, yeah, and the other comment reference to the shortfall in builds. You know, we have a shortfall as far as the council's concerned, but as I understand, it's not because of the allocation, it's because of the developers usually sat on the land for far too long. So I'm not sure that just allocating greenfield sites before brownfield is the answer. And an interesting thing came up while we were going through brownfield sites, what Councillor Hall mentioned. And it's strange that 3 of the brownfield sites are actually schools that have been closed or closed in the area, which means in the vicinity of this plot then there's only, I believe, 2 schools left. So now we've got a plot here with additional housing, no facilities for the kids really, and it's interesting that we've got £150,000 allocation for education, but I'm not sure what that allocation is going to do with 2 schools that are bursting at the seams at this moment in time. And I know that this isn't specific as far as an objection. I think it's really a bit of a jaundice, tiredness of us always going down the greenfield route rather than better allocation of brownfield sites and development of those first. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. I think just on that we have to remember that we're determining the application, not allocating the sites, because the sites have already been allocated. So yeah, do you want to answer some of the couple of the points, Reggie?
Yep, through you, Chair. I'll just come back on Councillor Pinnock's first, just in terms of the landscaping. So when that money is received, that goes to the landscaping team, and typically they approach the local ward councillors and have a bit of a consultation exercise as to how that's going to be spent. So at the moment, no, don't know how it's going to be spent. They're a bit more reactive than that. So when it comes in, they'll look to see the best use of that money. In terms of the grip bins, no, there's not currently a condition for that at the moment. If members are so minded, my suggestion to you as an officer would be it's probably unlikely to be reasonable. This is a modern road. We're not talking about, say, some of the more narrow and steeper ones in Home Firth, so it has been designed to be a bit more shallower, and it goes beyond what we'd consider reasonable for a modern road to need those grip bins. It's steep. There will be topographical challenges, but the road has been designed to have a shallow gradient as possible.
Yeah, go on, Councillor first. Yeah.
Can I come back, Chair? I would like it conditioned that we that grip bins are based on the site, and on a wider issue, you said £150,000 has been allocated for education. It's about time we were a bit more really realistic with what we're doing with off-site contributions, and it's not always education where it's needed. It could be road junctions, and so generally, I think we should take a slightly different attitude to 106 monies and where it can be directed.
Go on, Matthias, yeah.
I'll be quick. Look, I hear what you're saying. I think local plan 2, which you know we're well underway with, is the opportunity to reflect on section 106s and priorities and be a bit more nuanced and sophisticated than perhaps we currently are. That being said, you still need to make a decision on what's in front of you today. So there's something about a bus journey and getting to the end on the local plan, but accepting to here and today, you need a decision on this application. I hear what you say on grit bins. I know why you're saying it. It isn't from a place where you think, well, let's just get everything we can. You're asking sensible questions. It's the test. We've not done it before. I think you need to tell us to go away and think about it. Maybe not on this application, but as an approach. Because don't forget, these roads will be adopted. We will own these roads in the fullness of time, in all likelihood. So you're actually talking about a short window of where the developer's in charge, where they're not finished, whether they're... So I think it would struggle to meet the tests of a planning condition, and because we haven't done it elsewhere before, ever, as far as I can think, I strongly advise we can't just jump on this one and say here, but I can take it away with our highways teams and Mark Scar, and we can look at it in the future. I'm not trying to dissuade you, I'm just trying to tell you I don't think it's something I can do straight away.
Councillor Lawson.
Thank you, Chair. Once these highways are adopted by Kirklees, there's a policy of the only way you can get a grit bin is by moving it from somewhere else. So I agree with Councillor Firth, is the number of new builds that I have got in my ward where I've had to say, I'm really sorry, we're not allocating any more of them. I would actually think that we need to look at moving forward of there being a policy where they have to put some grit bins in and they actually pay for a number of years for them to be filled up would be something I think we should be looking at, because otherwise they will never get a grit bin unless we move it from somewhere else.
Yeah, do you want to come back on that?
I absolutely sympathise and don't disagree with the philosophy. In planning terms, does it meet the test of a planning condition? It probably doesn't. In our adoptions policy, which is a separate highway legislation that people come to the council and say, please adopt my roads, and the council says, build to this spec, it can be in that spec. Now, I'm not throwing my colleagues under another bus, but I can take that away and have a conversation with them. I think it's not a planning matter in its own right, and that's probably where I don't think you can secure it here, but can you secure it as part of the long-term adoption process, which is separate? That's a conversation you can have with highways. I just can't do it right now.
Yeah, I'm a little bit concerned about the grit bins, just because I'm not sure exactly what we'd be conditioning. Because if it's a condition to put a grit bin there, I'm sure we'd probably do that because it's probably cheap. But then if we do that in every development, who's going to pay for it? And I'm sure we haven't budgeted for that. That filling of the go on, Councillor Hammond.
Just on that point, Mr. Chairman, round about 10 years ago, I had an issue with what was then a new build in my ward. And there were grit bins that had been conditioned, but the condition expired after 5 years. The condition expired after 5 years. Now, the developer refilled them for 5 years, they've never turned up. Highways refused to adopt them. So I had umpteen empty grit bins with no grit in them and nobody going to put grit in them. So I think I understand what colleagues are saying, but I think it's a difficult route to try and go around from a planning perspective.
Councillor Firth, yep.
Okay, Chair. Perhaps this is the wrong time, but most of these developments, large developments, usually have a management company looking after those wonderful grass areas or landscaped areas, and they will look after the bins because we can condition it. And now's the time to do it. And as a forward-looking developer that we've got here today, I'm sure they would welcome providing grit bins and through their management company, refilling them when required to do so.
So I think the problem we've got is, if I'm hearing what you say, Matthias, is that we don't really know what we could really condition right now, and we need to actually think about it. I agree with what everyone was saying. It's a problem. We've got loads of estates. We've also got problems where we've got lots of roads that don't have grit bins now that could do with them as well. So it's a challenging question, but I do think it would be useful, even if we don't look at this in this application, that we take it away and come back to the committee on, is that something we could feasibly do? How would we do it? Could we do it by condition? Could we do it through another means? Yep.
Yeah, as I say, I'm struggling in this item right here and right now. From you, Chair, I will take it away. I will speak with the head of highways, Mark Scar, and we'll brief you and then that can be a way forward with the committees. I still think the appropriate route is probably not the planning, it's through the 38, but Mark might say, can you condition it? I need to check the legalities. I'm just not confident right now to do it, and you're needed to make a decision. I think we can do it in a short space of time, that we come to this over the next couple of months with highways, and then maybe a policy or maybe a bit of guidance note. We need to also speak to our customers, our applicants. They need to know what they're being asked to do in the future. So rather than just imposing, be a bit more collaborative.
Go on then, Councillor.
That's my best offer.
I hate what you say, but we have the developers representative. Could I ask her, through you, Chair, would you consider that to be an unreasonable condition? Just off the cuff, would you?
I think the problem is, Councillor Firth, I'm not sure. I understand what you're trying to. I'm not sure. I'm not sure we 100% know what we're asking for. So I see where you're going with that. I'm kind of in agreement with you, but I'm not sure it's the right. It would be fair to ask somebody to commit to that when not fully understanding what we're actually asking them to do. And the long term. Yeah.
There's a lot to unpick in it.
But
we can go away and have.
If we're looking at an adoption, that even in this case, this development, that might still be something that could be looked at that point. If that's okay. So last time.
I haven't given up on that one, but for today, we'll just move it to one side. Can I move the officer recommendation, Chair?
Second that. Right, we've go to the vote, I think, on the officer recommendation.
So voting on approval, subject to the conditions in the report and the additional one in the update and the addition to the Section 106 agreement in the update about ecological net gain. Councillor Firth?
For.
Councillor Lawson?
For.
Councillor Pinnock?
For.
Councillor Thompson?
Against.
Councillor Armour?
For.
Councillor Homewood?
For.
That's carried, Chair.
Great. Thank you for that. Thanks everyone for your attendance. It was a slightly longer meeting than perhaps we were expecting, but that's how it goes. Thank everybody and see you at the next meeting.